Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Freelance episode 30. It's been a while. We'd normally do it, would have done it last week, but weren't able to. And I'm not joined by Nick this week. You might recognize Adam. Adam has joined me from the channel Leonidas Sparta. Welcome.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Really pleasure to be here. I guess for those of you that don't know me, my name's Adam. I'm an ancient Greek reenactor, and I also have a YouTube channel where I sort of go in depth on ancient Greek warfare and hoplite armament, and do some stuff from our reenactments and bring them onto YouTube. Basically, sort of what I do.
Yeah, great. So, Adam has come to talk through some Greek armor that he has, a whole panoply that he's put together. So we're going to be doing that later on. But we do normally go through a few things first of all. And the first thing is to ask, have you been up to any projects or research recently? So, Adam, I'll go to you first.
I have actually been up to a lot because I just finished the archaic panoply 2 days before I took it out to Days of Nights, which was an event.
Okay.
So I guess the research had already been done. It was more finalizing and tweaking some of the armament to try and get it to work, and it did really, really well. So I got the newest piece that I got was the upper arm armor, and there was some questions about how that was going to work. Like in the medieval period, you typically have to point them, as opposed to lots of the Greek style is just self-clamping. So I was like, is it going to self-clamp? Am I going to have to find a way to point it? Because unfortunately, archaeologically, we have basically no remain. Well, we have very few remains with them, and no leathering survives or anything. Pleasantly surprised that it stayed on like a greave, just self-clamping really, really well.
Okay. So we're going to go into this in more detail later on, but just how much of the work do you do yourself when it comes to the Greek armor?
I try and do as much of it as I can myself. So all of the organic stuff I do. So I make crests, I make shields, I make clothing, basically. And I've done some of the metal work, but minorly. Lots of it I've repurposed from old armor. I've sort of hammered into something else. But pretty much everything that isn't metallic, I try and do myself. So I've made a couple shields. The shields that I make are actually made from scans of an original, which is kind of cool. And made in a similar way. But basically everything except the metallurgy I do myself.
Great, cool. And I know from our chats you also have a future project in mind.
Yes.
Is that public at the moment, or?
Yeah, it is now. So I have,
okay.
for a long time, wanted to get into a sort of Agincourt period impression. Specifically, I found out that I was related to Blair of Baltheoc, who's some Scottish knight, and our family has the heraldry and signet ring and other stuff. So I sort of wanted to recreate an actual ancestor. Being the whitest white person in the world, sometimes I get some hate comments. I'm doing Greek, so I was like, I'll switch to medieval, in which case you can't make fun of me. That's obviously not the main drive. But anyways, I've started building a sort of circa 1400, dead on 1400 English man-at-arms impression. So I've got a bassinet based on A69 being made by Art of Steel. I'm going to start making some of the undergarments and simple clothing. The actual doublets are quite a bit more complicated than my nice chiton, so I might have to go to someone who actually knows what they're doing for those. And actually at Days of Night, which is an event that I was at last weekend, I met a really, really nice group called Company of the Black Spear. And I'm officially going to be joining with them. So that's something that's really exciting. I've only ever done Greek before, reenactment-wise. So.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of research going on with that then.
Yes, it's a whole new world to get into. But thankfully, there are a lot of great channels actually on YouTube that do a lot of medieval stuff, like the Zach Evans channel. And I've also been going back and rewatching lots of Knight Errant's old videos, that Goldmine.
Yes.
And I actually got to meet Ian. He's in the group that I'm joining, so that was kind of cool.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely, it's like all the different doublets, all the different styles of armor. I'm just sort of like, Yeah, this is stuff that I never had to deal with before with the Greeks.
Yeah.
So a whole new world. But so far,
It's very, very different. It's so tight fitting at that point in history.
Yeah,
So,
it makes me want to lose a little bit more weight before I commission one.
Yeah. So, yeah, good. So I have been mostly doing painting miniatures recently. My friends and I are going to be playing a game of Warhammer 40,000 for October. So I've kind of jumped into that other hobby that I know a lot of people that are part of our history hobby are also part of that hobby. But
Yeah, the two
another
most
thing,
expensive hobbies.
yeah, exactly. Another thing is that I've got this, which is a Norman nasal helmet, and I'm currently researching to see whether or not this, which I managed to get extremely cheaply, whether this is something that I can modify to use as a more accurate 11th century helmet, or whether or not I need to actually get a new dome raised and start from scratch. So was just saying this is about 1 millimeter, slightly more than 1 millimeter in the dome. Now I need to start researching and find out a wider array of thicknesses. I know the one that this is based on is more than 1 millimeter in the dome, but it's only very loosely based as well. Things like the shape of the nasal is different. The original one also has brass attachments around the outside for a male aventail. So I'm researching and putting that together, and I'm going to be visiting one of my armourer friends towards the end of October to have a go at putting together a helmet for that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have...
and something.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Go. Something else that I haven't actually shared on the channel yet is that I ordered some more a male coif for the 11th century impression, and that has finally arrived. So that's actually still packaged up. I haven't opened it because I wanted to do an unboxing video, but it's not going to end up as a coif. So basically, again, I've been researching how things were done in the 11th century. We've got very little evidence, and one of my friends, Mitch, has got a really nice 11th century armor, and my plan is to look at what choices he's made and go completely the opposite. So where he's got a helmet that goes over the top of a coif, I'm going to go for the other option, which is a aventail attached to the helmet directly, which we have evidence for both. So yeah, and then we'll be able to do videos and stuff showing the differences and how you can get the same look from different methodologies.
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't know Mitch personally, but I see him online all the time. Is there an impression that he doesn't have, like, except for ancient Greek? It feels like he has basically everything.
He does it all. He absolutely does it all. Yeah, and to a really high standard as well.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
I saw, because I know that he has the sort of War of the Roses period harness, and I saw recently that he has a full-on like Agincourt one, and I'm like, whoa, this guy has everything.
Yeah, that's actually recent, and Art of Steel have done that. Have done that for him recently as well. So it's great to see Art of Steel getting more stuff out of their workshop. And
yeah, they're on fire recently, doing a lot. Noy Bassinet was like a week, and it's already the whole actual bassinet itself is done. It's all the interior stuff now. I'm like, oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
But we were talking about nasal helms before when you were talking about starting to build this, and we have a very surprisingly few archaeological finds of helmets at all in that period and Viking Age as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. But I also think that um, there's a it's it's weird that we would expect to have more. So, um, for example, one of the debates in the 11th century reenactment community is whether or not helmets was of a Spangenhelm construction or of a one-piece raised construction. Um, and it's basically a debate because we only have leftovers of one-piece raised nasal helms
Interesting.
from the 11th century. But if you were to, like in any period of history, if you were to only go with what you have left over um, things for, there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't be able to reconstruct.
Yeah.
And so I don't see that as a really great reason to rule out Spangenhelm construction completely, because yeah, you know, my 15th century armor is part of a style of armor that we have nothing left of.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think there's also the side that would one-piece helmets typically be more expensive and therefore more aristocratic finds, so more likely to survive, as opposed to things that
yeah,
are riveted together might be the type of thing that's reused and repurposed for other metalworking needs, as opposed to like a high-end helmet.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and we know that they were repurposed and reused because we actually have records. Specifically, I know of later records in the 16th century where Henry VIII just gets every piece of armor in the White Tower and recycles it. So,
Yeah.
you know, there could have been Spangenhelms in there.
And there could have
We
been
don't know.
a lot mail could have also been easily repurposed as well.
Mm,
So we have like the,
yeah,
the Yeomanboo mail shirt. Otherwise, I don't have very many more mail in the Viking Age, but that can easily be repurposed. And I think you even
yeah,
made this connection in one of your videos as well, that the amount of Roman helmets that we have compared to how many Roman soldiers there would be is also tiny.
yeah,
Whereas if we purely go on archaeology, there'd be like 15 Roman helmets, probably a bit more than that. I don't know how many we have.
yeah,
Whereas, of course, when you get to ancient Greece, we have like literally hundreds of bronze helmets that are in almost perfect condition because it just goes green, basically.
yeah. And that's the thing. As soon as they start having them made out of steel, or at least iron, even, then they're much easier to rust.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as they hit the ground, they can start rusting quite literally. You know, there's been times when I've woken up the next morning and found orange, like bright orange rust on my gear, which is
Mm.
part of the reason why my LARP armor is made out of leather and brass, because I didn't want to have to do loads of cleaning and like get sad every time it rained.
That's something that
Um,
I'm dreading when I'm getting into my 14th century stuff. Is with my stuff, it tarnishes really
yeah,
quick, but it's not going to damage the armor. I can polish it. I was talking to
yeah,
one of my friends, Nathan, who I met at Days of Nights, and he was like, "Yeah, as soon as I got home, I had to start cleaning the armor, otherwise it was going to rust." And I'm just sort of like, "Yeah, maybe I do want to do a
yeah,
minimalist man at arms, just so I don't have to deal with loads of steel."
yeah. Well, for my 11th century one, I'm considering doing a Wenceslas style helmet, but doing the skull and having it linseed blacked, so it's like matte
Okay.
black, and then making the nasal bar out of bronze, like
Ooh,
3 or 4 mil bronze, which I think would be quite cool. But
I
that
think that would
won't
look great.
change. That won't change the main problem of rust, which would be the mail. So because that can really hang on to rust. We've got some people in the chat now, which is lovely. It's good to see you. So we've got Janovic has arrived, catching up, saw the Spangenhelm and clicked. Yeah, absolutely.
He
We're
catches every
jumping
live
around a
stream. He's
lot.
great.
Brilliant. Good to see you. Yeah, it would make sense that they still have Spangen helmets, and we actually do see pieced together helmets later on in history. It never stops. So my armourer friend John that I'm going to visit, he actually has an actual 17th century helm, which is pieced together, and it's two pieces. You know the combed morions. They were actually made in two pieces, and one half of the comb is made larger than the other half and folded back over,
Oh, interesting.
so that it forge welds better. Yeah. Then we've got Francisco, who is subscribed to both of our channels, which is lovely. Thank you.
Good man.
If you're only subscribed to one of our channels, guys, then do subscribe to both, because
you need to fix that problem. Jeez, ASAP.
Yeah. And Francisco says that he's glad that that's his situation. So take it from him. Less people could afford armor, and fewer people did put that on graves. So, as Europe became more Christian, they stopped burying people with their armor, right? So we've got the Anglo-Saxon and the Viking graves where they were putting stuff in. And there's a bit of a crossover where some of the stuff has got kind of both pagan and Christian artifacts in it. But then after that, it kind of stops. But not entirely, because we do have effigies left in churches and funerary ornaments left with those effigies. So there's quite a few churches around Europe that actually have medieval armor stored away in them that was kind of part of the effigy. But then as Protestantism swept through Europe as well, then a lot of those just got taken down and repurposed, because like get rid of the remnants of Catholicism. So there's several points where we had stuff and then we lost it, and then we had stuff and then we lost it. But the Wenceslas helmet that nasal helm is based on was a funerary helmet that is associated with Wenceslas, but we don't know if it actually was his.
Okay.
But there would have been a point where there would have been loads of armor in churches, and then not so much. But of course, the cheaper helmets like the Spangen helms would not be left. Pardon me, would not be left in churches. Only the nice ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we got AME is happy to be here, because
that might well be my girlfriend who's just joined.
Oh, okay. Lovely. And then Mike says, I finished up clearing rust off my armor 2 weeks after placing on the damp temp drapes in the back of my car. Yeah.
That will do it.
And if you've got, Art of Steel, so you're getting your bassinet made by Art of Steel.
Yes.
And their standard finish is a satin finish, which is reasonably authentic. We don't know exactly what it would have been like, but getting a true mirror polish would have been really quite expensive.
Yeah.
But it rusts so quickly because the minuscule scratches in the surface that stop it from being true mirror just allow the water to bead on the surface.
Well, it basically increases the surface area of the helmet. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you've got to be either extra on it or just polish it up to that mirror
and then let it tarnish. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the same, because I polish all my Greek armor with satin, and it's like you can touch it and it will oxidize. Yeah. And I guess it'll be the same with the steel. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Right. So we've talked a lot about projects and research. Now we were going to have a little chat about events, but I've not been to any events. It's just you. So, yeah.
Okay.
You've mentioned it already.
I have.
Days of
That
Nights?
was Days of Nights in
Yeah.
Ohio. So
Okay.
that was the first time that I've been to that event, and I absolutely loved
Mm.
it. It was really, really cool. So lots of our events, I don't know if you have the same in the UK, they're timeline events here in North America. So it's like you'll have ancient Greece through modern military or whatever, sort of the type of thing. This one
Mm.
was a more focused, it used to be purely medieval, I believe, but now they opened up to ancients. So it went from us in around the 5th century BC, give or take 100 years, to the Polish Hussars. So it was sort of a more
Mm.
focused in, what's that, 5th century BC to 18th century? Is that the Hussars? 17th or 18th
Yeah.
centuries?
Yeah, probably.
Ish. And that was absolutely awesome event, really, really fun. And the public was really, really steady, really, really engaged. There was a little assault treasure hunt for the kids to do, and they could do a prize, and each camp had something that they could an activity or an item that they had to find.
Mm.
So it sort of made the kids really, really engaged, which was awesome.
That's a great idea.
I made these little 2-foot circular, I call them kiddie shields, that we could do phalanx
Mm.
stuff with them. So that was our camp's activity, was learn to fight in the phalanx with the Greek hoplites. So that was fun. I got to
Right.
meet some of you guys as well. I got to meet those two young guys that watched the channel, which was really cool. A couple of the other reenactors recognized me, and I filmed some videos with them, which was fun. I got to meet some people like Ian Lespina from Knight Errant. Really, really
Mhm.
nice guy. Really nice to meet him. And overall, it was just an awesome event. And I will definitely be going back again next year. Whether I'm with the Greeks or with the Black Spears will be a different question. I'm not sure. But
Do one day for each.
yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking
Saturday
about
with the
doing.
Greeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the problem is most of the events that Black Spear goes to, the Greek Phalanx goes to, and I'm like, I feel like I can't be a
Okay.
traitor, so I'm like, I'm gonna have to do
Yeah.
it where I split it half and half for some of them, I think.
Flip a
And that was
coin
the
at
day.
the beginning of the event.
What's that? Sorry,
Flip a coin. Flip a coin at the beginning of the event and see which way it lands.
just pack
That's the
the car full of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the chaotic version. Yeah.
And I also got to debut my I will never say completed because no reenactment impression's ever complete, but my full archaic hoplite from about 550 BC. So he's got the full armament, and that most people don't assume at all when they think of ancient Greek hoplites, which is sort of cool to show.
Mm.
And not many reenactors have this level. I'm actually not sure if any reenactors have every piece of armor that I have, because I have the Sabatons. I know there's only 2 or 3 of
Yeah.
us have the Sabatons. So that was something that I just really, really cool. A lot of experimentation. How is this going to work? And overall, apart from the thigh armor, I had a bit of problems with, but everything worked really, really well. So that went awesome.
Great. So that's our main topic for today. So we'll move on to that in a second, and we'll talk about it because that's something that's really interested me. Quite a few years ago, I went to the British Museum and saw some Greek sabatons, and it just really captured my imagination. So when I saw that you were debuting it this weekend and was thinking about what we could do for this stream, I thought, right, let me see if I can grab Adam because it's really cool. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Before we do, let's just say a bit of a thank you to my patrons. So I have a lovely group of patrons that are supporting my channel, despite the fact that I'm really bad at getting videos out on any kind of timescale. I tend to have moments where I get 1 or 2 out a week, like when I've got a bunch in the bank or whatever, and then some dry spells, usually when I'm at work. It usually goes because I work as a teacher. In term time, I have less time, and then in the holidays, I can get a bunch done. So looking forward to getting some more videos done, and my videos, as soon as they're done, I put up on Patreon, and then they become available on the channel later on. So thank you to you guys, and if you want to check that out, you can find a link in the description. As this is live streaming on my channel, if you haven't visited Leonidas Sparta, you can find a link to his channel in the description. And do you have a patron as well?
I do actually, yeah. I have Patreon and YouTube memberships, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And with the
So
feet
you
armor, I
can...
might start an OnlyFans. Who knows?
Absolutely, why not? So let's jump in then. So we're going to have a look at some Greek armor, and because you've been at an event, you've got a load of photos, which is great.
Yes.
So let me find this and bring it up. So here we go. So we've got here, this is your entire panoply, and you said this is from about the 5th century BC?
It probably more 6th. It start to fade out by the
Okay.
5th. So around 550 BC, 530 BC, around there, ballpark.
Okay. And the really interesting thing I think about this is that, as you said, it's just not really like full plate armor is not what people think of when they think of Greek hoplites. If
No,
anything, it's
absolutely.
like 300 wearing a helmet and carrying a shield, like and a leather jockstrap. But this is basically as armored as you can get.
Well, that's what I loved about this. This is, people usually say the 14th century is the emergence of full plate. This is almost exactly 2,000 years before the emergence of full plate. And that's something I find interesting, because you almost see a resurgence in armor, right? You sort of see this level of armament in around 550 BC, and then as warfare changes, and we'll touch on this, I guess, a bit later, but you sort of see almost a complete reduction to armor to basically, I say just mail. Mail's still a good armor, but mail for a long time, and almost a reintroduction of plate armor coming into the medieval period. And that's typically when people start to look at armor development, which is one reason why I really wanted to do this. And like, yeah, this is basically full plate. Like, you can't, apart from the fact that my gaps aren't filled with mail, basically as covered as a 14th century knight. But again, 2,000 years before. So that was one of my main. I just think the Greek aesthetic is super cool, and I get to wear full plate. It's just a win-win.
Yeah, and obviously this has got really good coverage, and it's all based on originals.
Yes.
But there are some big differences. So is this from this weekend that's just
yes,
been?
this was from Days and Nights. Yeah.
So you can see that from an articulation point of view, there are some big differences here. In your experience, how did it affect your ability to move and things like that?
Overall, not much. I was quite pleasantly surprised with it. Of course, most of the armor, like the bell cuirass or the transitional cuirass, ends at the belly button. So actual torso mobility is pretty good. The greaves you don't have any problems with. Of course, your shins don't really flex, so they don't really have much problems. The forearms, they also don't really have any problems, again, because your forearm doesn't move much. The sabatons, a little bit, but overall, not much. Like, you don't have as much flexion on your feet, but you don't, like, you can still walk and run in them perfectly fine and squat down. The upper arm armor restricts you a little bit, like, especially in collaboration with the cuirass, trying to move your arm forward. You can't really do this necessarily, because the cuirass is quite close cut. So you can probably get around to about that, but you can't quite reach over. And then the armor that I had the most trouble with is the thighs, because I've had to do a little bit of speculation on how they were sort of worn. So I've made an arming belt. But as I was sweating in the very hot weather, they started to slip. So thighs are interesting because thigh muscles move a lot depending on what you're doing, which sort of can help wiggle the armor. But they stayed for about 3 hours completely fine. It was sort of around hour 4 and 5 they started to slip down into my knee. So just a little bit of tweaking, but overall, movability is pretty good. But obviously, there are some movements that are restricted and a little bit awkward. And I've never worn a 15th century plate harness to compare the difference. But another thing I'd like to say is, like, weight-wise, this is pretty light. I haven't weighed the full panoply, but like the helmet's 2 pounds, the breast and back plate is 10 pounds, the greaves are 3 pounds. Like overall, you may be looking at about 30 pounds of weight, which is quite light when people, I think of plate armor. And it's worn in a way that is quite comfortable. The cuirass doesn't actually sit on my shoulders. You can basically slide. If I lower my shoulder, you can fit your hand up through them. It really hugs the belly button and natural waist, so the weight is distributed really nicely.
Yeah. So it's worth pointing out that the helmet on the armet that the knight is wearing next to you, for context, would be around 8 or 9 pounds, sometimes up to 10 or 11. So that's quite a difference.
Yeah, quite a difference.
But obviously designed to deal with different forces. There's no couched cavalry charges.
Oh, absolutely.
A Greek phalanx.
I often say that armor is designed for the battlefield it was used on. Obviously, there's a bit of interchanging there, like battlefields adapt because of armor as well. But when you're looking at my period, we're dealing with predominantly spear poking, short swords, lighter pound arrows, sling stones, things like that a 1 millimeter cuirass can protect you from. Whereas when you get into the 15th century, you're dealing with almost 200-pound draw weight bows. You're dealing with knights on horseback delivering massive amounts of power, two-handed hammers. So the armor has to deal with a lot of different weapons. So of course it changes and adapts and compensates for that. So whereas medieval harness might be a bit overkill in an ancient Greek battlefield, my ancient Greek armor on a medieval battlefield probably isn't enough in a way.
Yeah, sure. So the armor looks cool, but let's have a look at some of the research that went into it. So
yes,
this is you said this is basically what the panoply was based on.
Yes.
Can you talk on this a bit?
So this is my favorite little man. This is the longer figurine from the Temple of Apollo in Messenia. He is likely of Spartan origin, so Messenia was obviously part of Spartan territory in this period, and he was dedicated to Apollo. He is a great example of a fully armored hoplite of this period. Some of the details are a little bit off because this guy is quite old, but you can see that he has the thigh armor, he has the greaves, he does have upper and lower arm armor, of course, has a helmet, and he has, which was the main draw for this figurine, a really unique style of cuirass. So that was the hardest part to recreate for this figure. So I sort of use him as a timeline, something that would have probably fitted in around the Battle of 300 Champions, so around the Sparta versus Argos time, but also would have probably have been used around the time of the Persian Wars, probably falling out of use around then. So basically pre-phalanx warfare, which is interesting. So, of course, there's some problems that emerge when you're recreating things from artwork, that being that it is fundamentally an artistic rendition. So this guy has sort of a caricatured type style. Obviously, his head wasn't that big and compared to his body and everything. And we unfortunately have no archaeological survivals of that style of cuirass. So it's very much similar to a bell cuirass. For those of you that don't know, there are three main styles of bronze armor in the Greek world. The earliest style is the bell cuirass. It's called a bell cuirass because it is shaped sort of like a bell. It funnels in and then has this sort of tutu-like flared out waist, but it doesn't have any anatomical features. Then you have the very famous muscle cuirass, which is a later cuirass that is basically a fully anatomically correct bronze torso. But you also see a transitional style, which is sort of just coined the transitional cuirass, which is the gap that's bridging between the bell cuirass's evolution into the muscle cuirass. And we unfortunately have no archaeological finds of these, but we have a lot of depictions in both 3D and 2D sculpture. But this style is interesting because it's far more of a bell cuirass with abs than other transitional cuirasses, which are typically muscle cuirasses with the swelled chests. So that was the main hurdle for trying to reconstruct this. And I worked with Daniel Strando, who's an absolutely amazing metal worker in Sweden. And we cross-referenced it with loads of different sources. We found other artistic depictions that show a cuirass very similar in an Etruscan context. So we agreed that it was likely not an artistic rendition, and it was something reflecting reality. So we went ahead to create it.
Yeah.
And otherwise, the rest of the figure, because of the lack of detail on close-up pieces, I sort of resorted to cross-referencing it to other surviving pieces of the same armor. But for other aspects, so for instance, the crest, you can't really see it in this one, but he actually has a double crest box, and you can see the remains of a triangle pattern. So I did a rendition of that for my recreation, and you'll also see that he has a little Greek key on the bottom of his chiton. So I also tried to replicate that. So I basically replicated this guy as well as I could.
Can you remind us what a chiton is?
Chiton is the tunic that he wears, basically.
Okay.
So this style is a very, very close-fitting style of the archaic period, and you start to see the really baggy ones in the classical.
Okay, cool. And what about the banana that he's holding there?
He's just hungry, I think. That is likely the remains of either a sword or a spear, and you can also see the remains of what would have been a shield on his left arm as well.
Yes.
But that's unfortunately been broken off, and he has no feet. So I still decided to do the anatomical armor for the feet.
Yeah. Okay. So here we've got, in the next photo, you can kind of see the detail on the cuirass, which is lovely. And one of the things that you mentioned is how far out it goes on your shoulders. So this is quite different to my armor. My armor, from a medieval point of view, actually gives a lot more of the shoulder outside of the cuirass, and then it provides articulated protection for the shoulder. But your one comes out quite far and also goes over the top of the shoulders quite considerably. There's a lot of protection there. Is that pieced together there? How is that attached?
Sorry, how is which bit attached?
The top of the shoulders.
Oh, right. So it's a pin. So the back plate has a little knob that basically there's a hole in the front plate, sits over and locks into it. The actual closing mechanism, lots of the bell cuirasses unfortunately are lacking back plates. But there's one really well documented called the Argos cuirass that details. It's actually a really interesting closing method. One side is pinned on the inside. The other side basically has a lip that the top of the side plate slots in and the bottom, and then it has a little tie. So you tie it. So it's actually adjustable. It's about a 2-inch leeway that you can tighten or loosen the cuirass. And then the shoulders are pinned. So you can put this on by yourself. It is very, very difficult and very, very awkward. I haven't been able to do it yet, but other guys that I know that have this style of cuirass have been able to do it by themselves. So it's just an interesting. Most cuirasses are pinned on both sides, whereas this one is tied on one side and pinned on the inside on the other.
Okay, so the pins are on your left, is that right? And then ties on the right.
Yes.
Okay.
No, other way around. The tie is inside the shield, so the ties are on the left side.
Okay. Yeah. So interesting. So that's again a difference between the later plate armor. Is that usually if you have asymmetrical fastenings, you would have the buckles on the right-hand side, which is further away from incoming blows, and then the hinges on the left-hand side, which are obviously stronger. I wonder if it's a similar idea of placing the ties in the area that is less likely to be hit, but when you've got a massive shield, actually, for you, the side that's less likely to be hit is the left-hand side.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the reason why. I think so. Yeah.
Cool.
And that's actually something else I want to touch on that's interesting, is pretty much all of our Greek armor seems to show front and back plates. Whereas in the medieval period, there's a pretty long period of time where people are only wearing breastplates.
Yeah.
So that's something else that's sort of interesting, especially you think in our style of warfare as well, where you invariably literally have a guy pressed onto your back, but they still pretty much always do front and back plates.
Yeah. But so as you say that, my instinct is to say, but you're sideways on a lot more than we are.
In a way, but also when you actually get into the Orthismos press, your body actually collapses straight, not sideways,
Okay.
which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
The stance is kind of, I don't know if I can demo it here, but your actual legs are sort of like this, and you're standing like that as opposed to sideways.
Okay. Interesting.
And then
Wow.
you also mentioned how tight it was around the arms. This is something that they
Yes.
seem to quite dramatically change in the classical period, where you see the muscle cresses have a big cutout here to allow for that, which these are lacking. So obviously that protects quite a vulnerable part, sort of crux of your armpit, but at the same time does heavily restrict doing this.
Okay. And you're not wearing Tarouges. Do they come about when the cuirass opens up a bit, or is
So yeah,
not
tereges
really
are
linked?
they're interesting. So it means feathers in Greek, and we see them on some bell cuirasses, but they become more popular on later transitional cuirasses and pure muscle cuirasses, but they're still not universally depicted. We do see on some bell cuirasses, and the name is escaping me. I know it starts with an M. Basically, a lower abdomen hinged plate, sort of a groin and lower belly plate that is sort of hanging from the cuirass. But yeah, otherwise I think you don't see as many tereges on bell cuirasses as you do muscle cuirasses. And I think a reason for this is actually the bell waist, because by proxy it juts out like a tutu, but anything coming down, it protects 6 inches below where that bell juts out, because unless you're coming up from the floor, you actually can't hit the lower abs. So that I think probably has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, I guess another thing that I'd like to talk about from this photo, before we move on, is the crest box. So you make your own crests.
Yes.
And you said that there's these kind of triangle ones on this one that you've tried to copy from the figurine. When you said a double crest box, what does that mean?
So if you look down at the very bottom of the crest, you'll see that sort of a brown leather U bracket that this crest box sits in. So that's a feature that we see quite commonly on archaic crests. We basically see 2 crest boxes. That where the horsehair slotted in is referred to as the crest box. And so this style, we have no archaeological remains of crests at all, unfortunately. So it basically comes down to speculation and sort of looking at art. So this was a style of crest that I'd never done before, but I'm very confident in its authenticity, or at least something similar to. So this is actually a tablet woven crest box that slots into a leather smaller crest box that's glued directly to the helmet. We also have, I believe, in one of Aristophanes' poems, he mentions something about a crest weaver. So something similar to this. And we also have certain artistic depictions that show people holding crests like this, and they're hanging straight. So I wanted something that was flexible, so that if I held it up straight, it would hang straight. And I was sort of thinking about this, and I was like, well, tablet weaving is a way that you can get geometric patterns that are symmetrical because it's directly a woven pattern. They're very lightweight, which is awesome. Whereas a solid wooden crest box, like you can sort of see on the transverse crested helmet there, it's a solid wooden box, so it's a lot heavier. And it was a method that I'd seen Res Bellica had played with before they were a manufacturer. I was like, I'm going to give that a go. And Overall, I'm really, really happy with it. It's super, super light. It explains a double crest box. It explains how they might be woven, as Aristophanes explains. And it also explains how you can hang them straight. And also, just from a logistics perspective, if you had a guy who was a crest maker, unlike a wooden crest box that you'd have to literally cut it to the curvature of a helmet, this allows you to have basically mass-produced crests and fit them to helmets.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of theories about crest boxes, and likely there wasn't just one way of construction. Like a wooden crest box does also seem pretty realistic. We've also had some guys play around with leather woven crest boxes, and that gives you the checker pattern, where basically you make a leather box and then you weave leather through, and that's what ties the horsehair, and it gives you a checker pattern. So this is just something that I've sort of experimented with, again, trying to fundamentally capture that image on the original statue. And overall, so far, I've had this, I think I finished the crest in March, so I've had it for quite a long time, and it's worked great so far.
Great. Yeah. It's very cool looking. It definitely looks right from someone who hasn't done any research into
Well, thank you.
ancient Greek armor. It looks exactly right. Yanovich has left us, but we do now have Michael J. Foley and YJ in the chat, who often join us on our freelancers. So it's good to see them. We've got some more questions. If you've got any questions, do drop them in the chat, because we will come back and answer them as we have time at the end. So moving kind of slightly down from the crest box, let's go to the helmet with this lovely glamour shot.
Aura farming.
Yeah. So the crest is glued to this. This is a bronze helmet, the classic, what we would call Corinthian, but worn throughout Greece, as I understand.
Yes, so Corinthian is actually, I believe Herodotus actually calls them Corinthian helmets, but otherwise all of our other helmet terminologies are completely made up modern mumbo jumbo. So this is sort of specifically what we would refer to as a Myros style Corinthian. You can see that over my ear there's a bit of a unique sort of semicircular notch. These seem to have been a specific sub-branch of Corinthian helmets that we have very few archaeologically surviving. I think we maybe have less than 50 of these, and they all have been found in the Peloponnese. So there's sort of a theory that this is, and are also depicted on certain Spartan statues. So there's a theory that this possibly originates from one workshop. It was sort of one guy's signature feature that was specifically a helmet used around Spartan territory. So that was one of the reasons why I went with this model. But otherwise, yes, Corinthian helmets were a very popular helmet, sort of originating in the 8th century BC, getting more popular around 720, but actually dropping out of use around 450 BC. So where lots of people have this idea of the Peloponnesian War, people wearing Corinthian helmets, as far as we can tell, they stopped being produced by that time. You might have seen a few lingering, but they were sort of out of fashion. So yeah, this is a helmet that you might see, around 600 BC through to 550 BC, and it's based on this model here, which is in the British Museum. Absolutely gorgeous Myros style Corinthian. And it was made for me by Ferran, who's a Spanish workshop. They do some absolutely awesome work. And it's super, super light. So the helmet itself with the crest is at about 2 pounds. Whereas the one I have up there, that's sort of a more mass-produced Indian-made one, which still looks really good, with the crest is over 5 pounds. So there's quite a dramatic difference. I myself have never held an authentic helmet before, unfortunately. But some people in our group have held real artifacts, and they've told me that my helmet is the closest feeling to a real one that they've ever held before. So I was like, I'll take that. So
great.
0.8 millimeters on the back, and it thickens to 2 millimeters on the front. And that's something that we often see with Greek helmets, not always, but often, is thinning helmets where they might be less than a millimeter on the front, and even sometimes up to 10 millimeters on the nose in some extreme cases.
Yeah, so the nose on this one looked really thick.
I think it's about 5 mil on that one.
Yeah. And it looks very tight into your head.
Yes.
So when you commissioned it, um, did you get them to remake the original in its original size, or did you get them to make it for your head? And how do we know how much space was left inside of Greek helmets of the time?
That is a great question. It was modeled from my head measurements, and they
Right.
asked a lot of measurements, and they executed it really, really well. So Greek helmets,
Mm.
quite characteristically, are very close fitting.
Yeah.
We can tell this just from artwork; they're really, really close fitting, but also from the actual archaeological remains. These helmets, when you see them in person, might look very small, and it's because they are really, really close fitting. So
Yeah.
it actually is just making contact on sort of the tops of my cheekbones and slightly gets
Okay.
further away. But the visibility in this helmet is excellent. It basically,
Yeah.
like, if you put your hands on your cheeks like that, that's basically the visibility that you get. It's really, really good. Your brain filters out the nasal. You don't really see that.
Yeah.
And overall, yeah, it's a really, really close fitting helmet. I honestly don't think they could have made it fit better. They're genuinely,
Okay.
Ferro and Garetta is absolutely insane to work with. They're great.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
yeah,
then
so basically it doesn't touch at the nose, but otherwise it just touches at the cheeks and really, really close fitting.
okay. And do you wear anything in between the helmet and your head, or um,
Yes, I wear a really thin arming cap. We have some evidence of basically a felted cap. The
mm,
Pilos hat, which later evolves into the Pilos helmet, was likely, well, we know it comes from the Greek word pil, which means fur or felt. So we know it's sort of a felted hat. And
mhm,
we see that was a fashion icon, but also was likely worn as padding in Corinthian helmets. We also have some
okay.
Etruscan finds of grass woven caps, so likely would also have been used in the Greek world. And Aristotle also mentioned sea sponge as possibly being used. But overall, nothing really thick, something that just elevates it a little bit off of your head.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, we see later helmets sort of turn that fashionable hat into a bronze version. So we see, of course, the Boeotian helmet is modeled on a
Yeah.
hat, the Phrygian helmet is modeled on a hat, and the Pylos helmet's modeled on a hat as well.
Okay. So I guess in many ways the armor is designed for the battlefield. The forces involved in an ancient phalanx style battle are not the same as poleaxe combat in the 15th century and that sort of thing. So for those of us who are kind of cringing at how close that is to the skull, um, that's when most of the thrusts are overhead or overarm. Most of the thrusts coming towards your head are probably actually overhead spear thrusts, and they're probably not aiming for your head either, are they? They're probably trying to get for the throat or something
Possibly.
like
The
that.
head and the eyes are actually some of the only targets that you do have. But
Okay,
ideally, of course, you're trying to not stab into armor.
yeah. So you're trying to go around the armor rather than through it.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time people are wearing armets or great bassinets and things, the number of gaps are very small. Um, yeah, and so sometimes going through the armor is the only option.
Hmm.
Um,
But again, you sometimes even see the fronts of these helmets at 10 millimeters thick. So you do sometimes
yeah.
see really, really thick fronts and really, really thin backs,
Okay.
which is interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess then the thickness actually works as a padding all of itself because the weight of the helmet will counteract any momentum that's being generated into your face.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, it still wouldn't be pleasant, I'm sure,
No.
but you're not talking about someone wielding a poleaxe two-handed
Yeah,
um,
exactly. You're dealing with,
straight
and
into
of
the
course,
face.
we have this idea that people are always swinging 100% force. Probably about 80 to 90% of blows that you're coming into contact with are sort of light pokes, right? It's a glancing blow, or someone, I can quickly get past that, and it's a little bit of a poke. And we've even tested some people in our group organizer, Andrew. He's friends with Jeff Watson, one of the master armorers in the world. He became his apprentice, and he's actually made his own armor. And we've tested sections of it. And it was about 1 millimeter to 1.2 millimeter, just work hardened bronze. And we had a sharp spear. We strung it up against a hay bale and were stabbing it. And the most that we got through, and this was like full powered stabs, the most we got through was 1 millimeter. So not even enough to really poke through the undergarment. So overall, it sounds thin. And those were fully powered stabs as well. Overall, it's enough to save your life anyways.
And the shaping on this as well does so much of that work too, doesn't it? Because all of those lovely shapes, which have been captured so nicely in your reproduction, are just going to create those glancing surfaces that mean that it's so hard to get a decent hit that transfers all of its energy.
Yeah, it really does a lot. And especially you even see like this turns into the really iconic, what's called the Hermione Corinthian, the one that sort of has that triangular cranial ridge and the closer together cheek plates and all of that. The actual dome becomes more pointed in those. And that's the most enclosed style of helmet that we see. That sort of pops up around 500 BC-ish in time with the Persian Wars. So it's possible that's actually an evolutionary choice because they were facing more missile men. And then what's interesting is basically after the Persian Wars, we see a dramatic change to open helmets or helmets that allow you to hinge cheek plates up. So we sort of see this style of helmet, which is pretty enclosed, but not super enclosed. That changes into the most enclosed, which then changes into the most open. So we sort of see this interesting evolution.
Back and forth. Yeah. Great. So then going further down the arm, further down the armor to the arm, we've got these full arm pieces. We've seen your questions in the chat, guys, by the way. Thank you for them. Do keep them coming. We will address them at the end. We've got here the braces are classic. Like everyone knows about the braces.
They're kind of overrepresented in Hollywood. yeah,
absolutely. So bronze hammered out of one piece, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much all of this arm is one piece, interestingly enough. And again, just sort of self-clamping like a greave. And then the upper armor, what's that? Lined with leather. Typically, this is another reason why we can often tell that armor was worn just on skin. Not only is it just super close fitting, but we see that armor is directly lined with leather, which typically, if that's then worn over another garment, you don't need to line it with leather. So Hellenic armor, is really characteristically close fitting and quite thin. And then the upper arms, this was a piece that I was super excited to do. This is based on a find which is currently displayed in the Olympia Museum. These are pretty rare, and we, interesting enough, in artwork often just see the upper arms being worn. But we do see upper and lower arms. And this is a little bit of an atypical shaped one because it has these really elongated elbow bunny ears. I don't really know what you describe them as. Whereas most other ones seem to basically end at the elbow. But that is authentic to the original these are based on. We see some with really elaborately embossed like gorgon heads on the shoulders. Some of them are purely anatomical, like just plain anatomical, which is also, I think, look really cool. I went for this one because sort of the embossings, I think, sort of matches similar artistic takes that the cuirass takes, the little ridges. And this is a style of armor that we see exist only for about 70-ish years, so quite a short amount of time. which is one of the biggest mysteries for this. Why do you evolve out of full plate? We often think of people evolving to full plate. And the main reason, and this is one of the reasons why I love this period, is that we're not really fighting in what people think of as hoplite warfare. The phalanx isn't really a developed style of formation. So we actually see hoplites carrying 2 throwing spears into battle, not the classical dory that's a double-ended spear. We have descriptions of, I believe Tartaeus tells us that their hoplites are fighting intermingled with the naked men, or like the light armed troops. So it seems to be what we're looking at is a far less structured, more warband style of warfare, where you have hoplites intermingled with peltasts. They're throwing things at each other. They have longer swords in this period as well. So you're a little bit more individual. You're more of an individual fighting force. Still in a structured army, for all we know. We don't really know how this style of warfare looked, unfortunately. Just that there was no separation of infantry and skirmish troops. And that could explain why you see this implementation of armor. And of course, this wasn't normal levels of armament. Like, this equivalent would be like a knight of the medieval period. Most people would not have this full level of armament, but it would explain why it was used. If you're more open there, you're more open to ricocheting hits of people. You're more open to just getting hit from all sides. And campaigns are typically shorter as well. So most campaigns in this period are, sort of 3 days. You might take 3 days rations. You march to the polis, that's just the other end of the mountain range, and you fight for Farmadsfjall and come home. Which means that it's not as awkward to transport or wear all of this armor on campaign. Whereas when you get into the classical period and you're having multi-month campaigns, then this style of armor might just become too troublesome to transport or too troublesome to wear on long marches. So it just sort of gradually fades out of use, which is interesting. It sort of changes as phalanx warfare gets more developed. We see progressively armor sort of start to get dropped. And it seems that the sort of limb armor is a product of that.
And you say that actually reminds me of 16th century armor development, where again we see the medieval household style warbands kind of thing moving to large pike blocks with combined arms and things like that. And you see, for example, the Landsknechts wearing a lot less armor than they actually could afford. Because if you consider how much their silk clothing and things like that cost, they could have definitely worn more plate armor than a lot of them appear to be wearing in the images. And it's almost like when you're fighting in a big block, if you're in a position where you're being struck on the arms and legs, then you're in a really bad, armor isn't going to help you. Your block is broken, and you should be running at that point.
Well, that's something as well, is you're basically fighting fear more than you're actually fighting the enemy in this style of warfare. Like, these are citizen militia forces. They're roughly from any male citizen from the age of 18 to 60 could have been called up for military service. So your bakers, your farmers, your potters, sort of famously and proudly untrained militiamen. You have people like Xenophon saying that there's no need to train to fight with the sword, because the sword is merely an extension of your arm. So it sort of gives you a look at how they view martial combat. It's just instinct, essentially. And that was how you look at the Spartans. Like, this whole impression is sort of a Spartan modeled on a Spartan figurine. They basically were the dominant military force for about 200 years or so, just because they were slightly more disciplined than everyone else, and really just slightly more disciplined than everyone else. And that's how most of these battles end. Pretty much all of these battles end with one side running away. And that's why, obviously, intimidation is such a massive factor. And most modern estimates only place casualty rates being around 5 to 15%. So relatively low casualty rates in most of these battles. And it really is just, can you hold your ground longer than the enemy can before they run away? And And that would likely be when most of the casualties happen, is when one side starts to flee. So the actual phalanx warfare itself doesn't seem to have been particularly deadly. And that's something that makes this period so interesting as well, as these aren't mass annihilation styles of battles. You're fighting typically for fertile lands. You're in a mountainous area, you're neighboring polis, and you are competing for flat fields. And at the same time, you might be trading with them 2 weeks on from when you fight them, or you might even have relatives on the other side. So you're not really trying to wipe them out. You're just trying to win this land for yourself. And it's basically landowners fighting landowners. If you were wealthy, you could afford the most armor, you were put at the front. So you were fighting other aristocrats. A little bit different to how modern warfare tends to roll out. And it's like, I wouldn't necessarily use the term civilized in terms of war, but it's a little bit more civilized than other styles of warfare that you might think of.
Sure. Yeah. So, speaking of intimidation factor, we're going to move down a bit further, and we're going to move to the legs. Now, it may not seem that the link is there, intimidation factor, but I'm going to go back to when I first saw these Greek sabatons at the British Museum, and it just made me think. It made me put myself in the shoes of an individual who was marching to war, and seeing the Spartans in what appears at first, to be almost completely naked, and then you realize that their entire body is gleaming gold and shining in the sun, and their skin is impervious to arrows, and all of this anatomical armor. I think there is a real intimidation factor to that, of like, who are these people? On a battlefield, you can't really, you don't take everything in. You're not really thinking your best, and seeing blocks of men whose skin is just glistening in the sun, gleaming gold, must have been absolutely horrifying when, especially if you're very unarmored yourself. And it almost kind of evokes the idea of, which was very popular at the time, of demigods, and like Achilles and all of that sort of thing. That these people there, it doesn't matter how many times you hit them, they're not going to go down. And I think I mentioned to you about this, of how this possibly where that idea of the Achilles heel is, of like, actually the greaves and sabatons and things almost look like it's his actual body, and nothing can go into it, and then round the back there is a small gap where the greaves clamp round, that you would be able to get him, but
potentially bypass. And we even sometimes see actual ankle guards worn separately as well. So you sometimes even see around the back that. And I think that's a massive thing. Of course, something that's such a staple of Greek armor is its anatomical features. So, you have muscle cuirasses that look like shirtless guys. You have greaves which look like legs. You have sabatons that look like feet. And of course, the human body was something that was very societally prevalent in the period. It was something that was to be sculpted into a perfect form and sort of displayed. And heroic nudity is often promoted in artwork. So by making the armor model basically the nude form, you are in a way being heroic, because you are resembling a nude body. And I think that's something as well. Now, keep in mind, I have some nice white pasty skin. If you had someone that was even more suntan, then to actually see the gaps in the armor might even be harder because it's closer to that
Yeah,
bronze look. And
yeah,
we have the whole idea. The Spartans later on, we get some descriptions of how they sort of moved, and they supposedly moved in silence. They walked in step, and they walked to the sound of the orlos, which is sort of like a bagpipe sounding double pipe.
mm,
Whereas other polis at the time had to have like marching songs and they did stuff like that. So you can imagine the fear factor of not only does the Spartan reputation, today it's
mm,
still quite a fierce reputation, but in the period, can you imagine if you're an amateur farmer and you're looking across the field at these guys walking to battle instead of running, in sync, dead silent, donned in some of the most wealthily equipped armaments in Greece? The fear
mm.
factor of that would be huge. And we even have some events where one side runs away before the battle even starts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Francisco mentions in the chat, putting your most armored guys in the front generates the impression that the entire army is like this.
Yeah,
So not only would having your most armored guys in the front help from a missiles point of view of like they can actually soak up the hits, but again from an intimidation point of view, I have no idea whether you've got 100 fully armored guys or 1,000 fully armored guys. Like all I know is that the front rank looks practically impervious.
yeah.
um, mm,
And it would
yeah.
have just been, yeah, it would have been just imagine, especially, yeah, like if you're like a 19-year-old who's just been called up to his first battle, and you know that you're coming up against like Spartan Olympic champions on the front. You're like,
Mm,
oh my gosh, okay. And something as well, of course, shields are a massive part of this as well. My shield
yeah.
here is a solar symbol. This was from a shield park also dedicated in the same temple, so it's an Apollo symbol, which is one of the
Mm,
reasons why I chose it for this impression. So basically, my guy just loves Apollo. Um,
okay.
but so we see all sorts of different, we call them blazons. You might see
Mm,
Gorgon faces, like mythological creatures, which, of course, if you stare into the eyes of, you turn to stone. But at the same time, you also have depictions of dogs pooping on shields. So it's sort of funny
yeah.
to think of, you could have sort of a telltale sign of who is the guy that you're fighting by the shield. Plutarch writes about a Spartan who painted a life-sized fly on the face of his shield. Because he wanted to thrust his shield so far into the enemy's face that it appeared to them as a lion or something like that. Changes roughly in the translation.
Yeah.
Um, but you see all sorts of different things, and we like obviously the Spartans with the lambda is a really famous image. The evidence for that is probably a lot less than people like to think. We have one
Okay.
source, which is actually a 9th century AD writer called Photius, who cites an ancient Athenian comedic writer called Eurypolus, who basically mentions atop the hill were gleaming lambdas or something along those lines.
Okay.
And that's around 420 BC. So it's possible that they didn't wear the lambdas at all. It's equally possible that the Spartans themselves didn't wear the lambda. It was Laconian subjects who perhaps forcefully conscripted to war.
Okay.
Um, so that whole idea of the Spartans actually being uniformed with the lambda might well be a myth, and certainly for like the Spartans of Leonidas, no lambdas would be present then.
So
But we
they would have more personalized heraldry.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, you might see like clans like
Mm,
have the same sort of shields. You might have a family crest, but otherwise, yeah, it seems to be that you're independently. You can do whatever the heck you want. Like the eagle
mm,
might be Zeus protect me, but a dog pooping's a little bit of a joke, and you see both in the same
yeah.
shield walls. So
Yeah. And you see that all through history of um, fighting individuals. You get different people in the same army, some approaching it, I guess, dealing with the trauma through comedy,
yeah,
and some being incredibly serious and it can be very religious about it as well. And sometimes the same in the same person, dealing with the horrors of war in the same ways throughout history. Whether that's a an ancient Greek shield with a dog pooping, or the Wipers Times, which was a comedy newspaper that the British troops printed in World War One. Yeah, it keeps on. It's always the same, but also different. So this here we have another photo of your Sabaton along with a 15th century Sabaton here. And you really like this photo. I really like this photo as well. It kind of encapsulates what we've just been saying about everything. Everything is the same, but also different. Yeah. What was your experience of wearing these Sabatons?
They were pretty great, to be honest. Like for most of the time, I didn't even notice that I was wearing them, which I think is good. The hinge hinges exactly where I need it to, so it doesn't like crush my toes when I kneel down. I have had one problem. I was not aware how long our march was going to be at an event, so I decided to fully kit up. And it was a 3-hour long march through unkept fields. And basically, eventually, my Sabaton got pulled loose and it started to rub and the joint got misaligned. That was very uncomfortable. But again, I don't think these are the types of armor that I think we put on last minute and taken off as soon as the battle's over. But yeah, overall, it works great. Like, and this is something I sort of love about this, is you can sort of see how the armament is there 2,000 years before, but it's executed a little bit more crudely. You know, you sort of have that armadillo overlapping segmented Sabaton that allows for probably more flexibility than your foot actually needs. And then you have mine, which is just one articulation point, but they protect pretty much the same amount and they protect the same piece of armor. But yeah, overall, you walk flat-footed anyways. Most ancient and medieval people seem to walk flat-footed. But otherwise, it doesn't really impact you in a way that's annoying or noticeable.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly my experience with Sabatons as well, is that you don't notice them at all until something goes wrong.
Yes, and then you notice them a lot.
And then you do. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I guess very similar. I think so these are the originals there. You can see the anatomical, obviously the toenails, absolutely no defensive reason for them, but
nope, just style.
just really cool. And you know, the modern term aura farming, did you mention that earlier on? Someone mentioned it. I've just actually, I think we really focus on the two aspects of armor, of mobility and defense. But looking cool and having like the best looking armor or clothes that you can afford, and you know, having that, you know, whatever you want to call it, aura farming, actually has a huge impact on your own morale. You know, if you're walking into battle and you think, damn, I look cool, that will affect how you deal with the fear and the you know, the morale effects, even if it doesn't have any other effect at all. Like this, like I was saying, like seeing someone completely decked out in gold armor might be terrifying. The toenail itself isn't going to be terrifying, but the effect that this will have on the person wearing it, of like, I have got the coolest armor, like, will affect the way that they fight.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you're the same, but I often find like we do a lot of public events and armor almost works as an armor from embarrassment as well. Like there's almost that psychological factor of they're not seeing me, they're seeing the armor, which means that I'll probably be more extroverted when I'm wearing armor than when I'm not, which is sort of an interesting side. And I think that psychological impact of wearing armor is something that, as you said, is sort of really underplayed And I think it's actually
Yeah.
huge. Like, there's even the attitude of, yeah, I can survive this, even if you actually might not. But that whole
Yeah.
idea of I'm fully kitted out in armor, I'm not as scared of those arrows. It could have a
Yeah.
massive, massive factor on maybe you would charge or you otherwise wouldn't have charged, or maybe you would have stood your ground or you otherwise would have fled, which is something that I
Yeah.
think is often neglected.
Yeah. So absolutely, and I have first-hand experience of this. I was doing a promo event for us, an English Heritage St George's Day event, and that basically involved me being in full plate armor with a St George's flag, walking around Canterbury, and at one point, a bunch of definitely drunk 20-somethings, all lads, who one of them was literally carrying a 20-pack of lager, came up and literally surrounded me and were like, "Is that real armor? What is it? What would happen if I punched you or whatever?" And they were jolly. They weren't being like really aggressive, but there was that like undertone of like, "Oh, I really want to punch him." And I was able to deal with that in a way that was completely detached from how I would if I wasn't wearing that armor, because I knew actually I would be able to deal with it. If it did
Mhm.
turn nasty, I wasn't Zach. I was, I wasn't Zach, like a quite skinny 20-something-year-old, um, uni student. I was a knight in full plate armor that if they punched, if they tried anything, I'd be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's
yeah,
actually a great modern example. Yeah, because otherwise, if you're surrounded by a group of people, that's one of the scariest things probably that could happen. Whereas, yeah, if you're in
yeah,
full plate, you're sort of like, try me, bucko.
yeah, yeah. Um, I was wearing my jousting armlet as well, which is, um, and my Gothic gauntlets, which are incredibly aggressive pieces of armor, um, because um, Gothic gauntlets are basically knuckle dusters that have grown up, and the armet just, yeah, if someone tried to punch you while you're wearing that thing, you wouldn't feel it at all, and they would break their hand.
Yeah.
um yeah, so yeah, anyway, um right, we're almost there. You said that the thigh guards caused you some issues.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that before we get to the questions from the chat?
So the main problem with this style of armor is we have very few archaeological finds surviving, and most of the art doesn't show cords and ties in detail or at all. So obviously the thigh is a complicated piece of armor because it's a part of the body that goes fat to thin instead of thin to fat, which means
Mm,
that things typically want to slide down the piece of armor. So that made me basically create an arming belt, a suspension belt. So it's pointed to a belt that I wear that goes around my hips.
okay.
Um, and the actual thigh armor itself, these were a piece of armor that I made, and I sort of recycled some old greaves, so they don't wrap around my leg as much as they should. And then you can see I've sort of secured them on the back with straps. Um,
Okay.
in art, we see some that seem to just fully enclose the leg like a greave with just a small line. We see some that seem to be laced and some that seem to be strapped, but overall, they should wrap around my thigh a little bit more than they do.
Mm,
And for most of the time, it's just a piece of armor that does restrict the motion a little bit more because obviously your thigh moves a lot when you walk, it stretches and it shrinks and stuff like that. And it just sort of felt like I had a tight tight thigh muscles in a way. Like I couldn't quite extend my motion as much as I wouldn't be wearing them.
Sure.
But again,
Yeah.
not really in an impractical way. The main problem is it was hot and I was in armor from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I was in armor for quite a long time, and it was a hot day. And as I started to sweat, the belt from my waist started to slip, which just made the thigh armor progressively start to slip down. And I could pull them up, but then there was no, the ties weren't keeping them where they were. So, after a couple hours of wearing these and sweating, the armor started to sort of slide down behind my greave and block my kneecap from moving. But again, I was probably wearing this armor far longer than someone would have in period as well.
Yeah, and I think, you would be adjusting it in period as well. Like, that sounds very much to me like exactly the kind of problems that I might have with my armor, but I would adjust it as those problems happened and became apparent. Nothing stays exactly where you want it to.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else, even things like how recently you've eaten will change how tight the armor is around your waist and things like that. As food travels through your digestive system, your stomach and torso change shape. So something that you put on 2 hours ago and fit really well might be causing pain now that your body is a slightly different shape.
Yeah.
So yeah, that that to me doesn't sound like an issue with the armor so much as an issue of that you would expect,
Right. Yeah.
and that you would just adjust as need be. You could imagine even if you were wearing it on a march, at that time they wouldn't be marching non-stop for 2 hours, and they would be able to take a break and adjust it and make it better.
Another thing that's interesting to think of is, of course, lots of early, really wealthy guys were horsemen. They didn't fight on horses, but they rode on horseback, which could quite possibly mean, and that's actually a theory as to why the bell cuirass has that big flared out bell. I think it has a lot of features, but that can allow you to sit on a horse, whereas later muscle cuirasses typically actually extend down almost to the hip, which obviously prohibit more motion. And it's like, for instance, you have the Spartan Hippias, which means horsemen or horse owners, but we know that they didn't fight on horses. So it's possible that they either originated from a very wealthy, noble background who would have been able to afford horses, or they actually did ride horses but dismounted. So it's also possible that some of these guys were riding, in which case you wouldn't have to worry as much about armor slipping in the time coming up to battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're on the rich side, you would probably have slaves with you who would help you as and when you needed it.
Yes, absolutely. Especially if you were this equipped, this would be like multi-millionaire level, maybe even billionaire level armament. Like this wouldn't have been a common arrangement even in the archaic period to have seen.
Like top 10%, top 5%, what we...
It's hard to go from because lots of artwork shows the toppest of the top, but even then we have very few depictions that actually show the full level. So I might even say like 3%, 5% of people, like really, really small amounts, would be this fully armored. Like you would have seen probably quite a lot of guys with, helmet, cuirass, greaves, but to have seen the thigh and foot armor, like the foot armor is basically an armor of last resort. Like it's one of the, even we see it in your period, often full knights will just not bother with sabatons because feet are often quite a difficult thing to hit. And even if you do hit them, you often risk getting hit in a far more deadly area while striking someone's foot. So to see someone this fully encased would be a very rare sight, I would assume.
Sure. And things go in and out of fashion based on recent happenings that we might not be aware of. So, for example, in the late Hundred Years' War, there was a very famous guy, the Earl of Arundel, got shot with a black powder gun in his foot, and he lost his foot. But he was too proud to have it looked at by physicians, and it ended up getting infected, and he died. So basically, he died from foot injuries. But what you do see is that it appears that Sabatons are kind of ubiquitous throughout the 15th century for Englishmen, and it's possible that deaths like that contribute to that fashion of it staying, whereas in other parts of Europe, like for example Italy, Sabatons are reduced to usually male rather than the full plate. So
that's interesting. And actually, one of my main reasons for wanting the Sabatons, not only because I think they're cool, but is our guys wear lots of hobnailed sandals. And when you're in tight formational style combat and you have an open toe shoe, it is inevitable that you have a hobnailed sandal land on your toes and twist to push off from your toes and may or may not crack your toenails. So that may or may not have been an influence for me to decide to actually get this armor, was to actually protect my feet from my own guys stepping on them.
Friendly fire.
Yeah.
Good.
Because that's not very comfortable, as you can probably imagine.
Yeah, I can very much imagine. Oh, in fact, I've had my foot trodden on by a horse while I was in medieval shoes, so I don't need to imagine. I can I think I can one up you there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's a one upping. Yep, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the chat. Let's grab some questions from in there. So Josh Lopez said, did different crests signify different ranks at this time?
Great question. We don't have any evidence for that in a Hellenic context. So it seems to have been purely personal choice. Of course, the Romans have crests that symbolize ranks. With a Greek context, it seems pretty much universal that almost everyone had a crest. And we see some crests, like we see antlers, we see horns, we see other things that aren't horsehair, sometimes feathered quills. But the horsehair crest seems to be the most universal. Now, we see three main types of crests. We see the longitudinal crest, which is what I have. You see the transverse crest, which is the one that goes side to side. I have an example up there on my shelf that you can probably just see, very pixelated. And then you have what's called the J crest, which is sort of the one that comes up in a hook. That seems to be very popular in the Archaic period. The longitudinal crest seems to be the most common, and the transverse crest seems to be the rarest. But the problem is that the transverse crest can only really be depicted from the front. And over 90% of our hoplite depictions are depicted from the side, which automatically means that over 90% of your transverse crest depictions, over 90% of your hoplite depictions will not be transverse crested, whereas pretty much all of our frontwards facing hoplites do have transverse crests. Actually, they are also rarer. Some people link the transverse crest to Sparta. The only real reason for that is because one of the earliest figurines that has one was a Laconian figure. But overall, in a Greek context, it doesn't seem like there's any rank indicator. And rank changes depending on campaign as well. So it would be something that would sort of have to be rotated if it was a rank indicator.
Okay, sure. Okay, so likely to be some kind of personal thing. Again, going to the medieval period, we have personal crests that are almost used for battlefield identification. And my experience in shield wall battles is that all you can see are people's heads.
Yeah.
So if you're looking, if I'm looking for Adam on the battlefield, like, it doesn't matter what the rest of you is wearing or what's painted on your shield, friendly people can only see your head. So if
Yeah.
I need you for any reason, then I'm looking for you. I'm looking for your crest, basically, because the details on the helmet are too hard to pick out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then Michael J. Foley asks, what about those Scythian or Persian horse warhammers, though? So I think that was when we were talking about the thinness or the
Yes, those
lightness
are
of the
great.
helmet.
I believe it's called the Cigaris. There's a Persian battle axe, which is basically an early Bector Corbin. It has a anti-armor spike on one end and an axe blade on the other. We did a test on a shield slab that I made. That was the only weapon that was able to punch through the shield. Um, and I actually think that that would be able to go through armor. It seems really, really ruthless. But of course, the style of armor that I'm wearing wouldn't have been coming into contact with the Persians.
Yeah.
So it's sort of interesting to look at. But yeah, I think that would have been a very feared weapon, and I think you would have had to hit it pretty hard to especially go through the armor and into the body enough to kill. But I do think that anti-armor spike out of every weapon in the period that it was coming up against would have had the best chances of going through.
Yeah. You got to bear in mind as well that there will be weapons on any battlefield. You don't wear armor to the heaviest weapon on the battlefield. Generally, you'll be wearing armor to the most likely or
Yes.
the most common weapon on the battlefield. So we don't, in the modern day, we don't armor our troops to the point that they can withstand anti-tank rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from anything else, if we did, they'd just make the anti-tank rounds stronger. So the cavalry warhammers and things like that, the defense against them is to hold your ground in your phalanx, and then they can't get close enough to use it. You can start wearing more armor, but that will cause other problems and may not actually defend against the cavalry warhammer because they'll just shove it in your neck instead.
Yeah. That's something else
Yeah.
that's interesting as well, because I often find that mail gets a really bad rap of being like an all right armor that's easily bypassed. People often say that like mail's a weak armor, but you still have to realize that probably about 80% of the attacks that you're facing when you're wearing mail, the mail will be the difference between life or death. And I
Yeah.
made the analogy in one of my videos as well of like, we equip law enforcement and military personnel with bulletproof vests that don't stop sniper rifles, but they stop handguns.
Yeah.
But just because you can bypass the bulletproof vest doesn't mean that there's no point in wearing the bulletproof vest. Or it's like people who I've never been shot wearing a bulletproof vest, but I know people who have, and you still feel the hit. You invariably break ribs, or you get winded, and you still go down. So the same way that mail doesn't necessarily shock absorb, but it does fundamentally stop the bullet or the blade from actually penetrating the body.
Yeah. And it's a question of, would you rather mail or no mail?
Yes. I'd rather mail, I think, all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alexi, who's making your helmet, apparently used to wear mail around town.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is a second-hand story from Mitch, because Alexi made Mitch's armor as well. So yeah, maybe next time you chat to him, ask him if that's true.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say, is he going shopping in London or something?
Well, I think I don't know. In some parts of London, you might be benefit from wearing mail. I benefited from wearing plate armor in Canterbury, so
Yeah, there you go. Bring back the
Yeah.
peak male fashion.
Yeah. So YJ asked, would armor generally be deliberately work hardened or maybe annealed so it won't break? Can I jump in on this one? Because
Yes.
I've been making brass armor myself. So we were talking about this, I think, before the stream started. But
Yes.
So for my LARP armor, I've been making. This is actually brass, but the concept is similar to bronze, and it work hardens really quickly. And if you're going to get any deep shape at all, then you do need to anneal it. You're going to need to anneal it several times, and especially if you're looking for something that's really sophisticated, like the armor that Adam wears. Like, yeah, it's just what you're going to have to do. And we were saying that in many cases, you might actually find that a work hardened bronze piece might be stronger than a low quality wrought iron piece. Because, yeah, it's not the wrought iron that they had particularly in the early medieval period was not the same as the mild steel that we use nowadays as its replacement. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, yeah, pretty much. I think as a finish, you pretty much rely on the work hardening to strengthen the armor. But yeah, as you work it, you have to keep I forget
annealing
the term, but what you annealing it to allow it, to allow it to be worked without fracturing.
Yeah. And then Michael J. Foley was saying about the gold, but the gold armor made to look like a human body has like an uncanny valley kind of effect.
Yeah, I can get that.
And then YJ suggested maybe there was some reluctance to look inhuman, and it might be related to the much later armor that sometimes imitated clothing. I think you see both in many ways. I think there's a certain you're not trying to look human. You're appearing to be superhuman almost, aren't you?
Almost demigod-like as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael again mentions that Alantica or heroic armors. You know, they're designed to make you look cool. There's a really, really nice clothes helmet which has got the guy's beard and hair modeled into it. So his helmet looks just like his own head. But all of the skin parts are silver and all of the hair parts are gold plated.
That's cool.
And it's articulated at the neck, so he's got full movement. It is so cool. That's not because he wants to look more like a human. That's because he wants to look more than human, I would say.
That's a cool helmet. That's cool.
It is very cool. And I think, we see that in Greek armor as well. And we do see ancient helmets that have faces modeled into them.
Lots of Phrygian helmets have beards.
Yeah.
We even sometimes see on Corinthians hair as well, sometimes.
Yeah. It's likely some of those historical finds actually inspired the 16th century anatomical armors.
We see that with the barbute as well. Lots of barbutes are sort of coming around. There's a specific style of them that look very Corinthian-esque. And that's in a time where the classics are getting sort of like there's a big focus on looking back at the classics, and you sort of see in that same period that Corinthian-esque barbute originate. And it would have been awesome in the picture here where I'm so next to Chris. Chris has an armlet. It would have been so cool if he had a barbute with that Corinthian style, because then that would have literally been like a direct transfer.
Yeah. And I think there's maybe we can see it in this picture here. You know, you do have a feeling that people are happy to move away from a look of humanity. You know, the 15th century plate armor, they could have made it a lot more anatomical than they actually did. And especially if you go even further, if you go to Germany, some of the styles that you see develop towards the end of the 15th century look almost insect-like. And that again has an intimidation factor of it's almost demonic, you know, so spiky, so aggressive kind of thing. So you've got some styles which look almost angelic with, you know, gold beards and heroic muscled armor and things like that. And then some styles which are, you know, drawing on those other things of demon and other powers, like for example the shields, the hoplite shields painted with the Aegis, Medusa's head on them, and like invoking that kind of darker side to the mythology. Amy says, "What color is your armor?" and then has a picture of a blue car.
I think my armor's blue.
Is it? Okay.
Well, actually,
is that your 15th century armor?
That's a good question. See, I might be going for one of those Corazina style armors with the fabric front.
Okay.
I'm going to toss up between I want to do red or blue, and I'm not sure. But actually, I will touch on this. My armor is technically half brass and half bronze. So my lower half is bronze, and my upper half is technically brass, but they're very similar in color, as you can sort of see in this picture. But that's actually something that's interesting. Is modern bronze is actually quite different to ancient bronze. We have, I believe, there's more copper in modern bronze than ancient bronze, which gives it actually slightly darker color. And basically, ancient bronze would have varied in color depending on batch. Lots of it was hand mixed. There might have been lead that slips in. There might have been more tin that slips in. So roughly, the actual chemically, we basically can't recreate ancient bronze because it just isn't quite the same. But color-wise, I satin polish all my stuff because it sort of mutes it down. Color-wise, ancient bronze would have varied from about modern brass to modern bronze, which is something to touch on. So my armor is, well, some of it, like my cuirass is tombac, so it's sort of an in-betweeny stage. But color-wise, ancient bronze would have likely varied depending on what batch of metal your armor was made from, and could have varied from about modern brass to about modern bronze.
Okay. We're coming towards the end. YJ says, "Yeah, I mean when it's finished." I assume that was a response to us talking about the annealing and work hardening process.
I think it was.
Yeah. So when you finish the armor, there wouldn't be any point to annealing it at that point, because you wouldn't want to soften it again. So yeah, once you've done your final hammer blow and you're happy with the shape, there's no point in annealing it again after that. Yeah. And YJ also says arsenic bronze might be harder to find today, I imagine. I don't think any of us have tried, to be honest. Have you?
Nope.
So there we go. Thank you so much for talking me through this armor. It's such a cool armor, and like I said, ever since I saw those Sabatons in the British Museum, it's been living rent free in my head, and it's just so great to see someone finally do
thank
it.
you, thank you,
and do the full plate. So I'm super chuffed that you were able to come and join us for this one. And
no,
talk
I've
us through
really
it.
enjoyed it.
Oh, Amy, good. Amy's got a final question. Why is thigh armor made if the shield is there?
That's a great question.
The final...
There, fundamentally, your thighs are predominantly covered by your shield. However, again, in this style of warfare, that might be a little bit more intermingled and loose. There's more areas for weapons to get around that. And interestingly enough, most of our injuries that we often get described are thigh and groin injuries. So it's quite a vulnerable area with a lot of blood vessels. So it might be the type of thing that after you've got greaves and a cuirass that are protecting the most vital organs and your most exposed areas, and the helmet, that you might prefer to prioritize other possibly deadly, if they get hit, areas.
Yeah, and like we said, most people would not be wearing all of this armor.
Yeah. Like, so probably in the
this is like
something percent.
Yeah, this is the extreme. Someone who is very safety conscious.
Yeah.
This guy's wearing 2 pairs of ear defenders to the work site. He's wearing high vis jacket and high vis trousers. He's double bagging all his groceries, and he's wearing thigh protection and carrying a shield
and looking good whilst doing it.
Oh yeah,
peak male fashion here. 2,000 years apart, but both peak male fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, like I said, it's great to have you on. It's great to see this armor completed. Final question from me, do you have any plans to change any of it, or are you happy with it as it stands?
Overall, I'm really happy with how it looks. It's been a long process. It's been, I think, probably about 6 years to start to finish for everything. There's a few bits of armor that I wouldn't mind getting, the armor that I've made, that either I want to remake now that I've learned a little bit more, or get professionally made. Like the van brace is a little bit too short, but overall, nothing that I'm in a big rush to replace.
Sure. Okay. Lovely. Great. Well, look forward to seeing your future projects. Thank you for coming on. Do check out Adam's channel. You can find a link in the description down below. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, if you're visiting because Adam's here, then do subscribe. You can go through my back catalogue. There's a lot of stuff about the 15th century, and now I'm breaking into the 11th century as well. Adam, obviously, you've been focusing mostly on ancient Greek, and you're now breaking into the late 14th century.
Yes.
So, by the end of the decade, we might have every century covered between us.
We might just switch channels eventually. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I really had a good time.
Thanks for coming, and thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and